Kia ora koutou. I'm Sian Davis, an Enterprise Advisor at Venture Taranaki, and you're joining us for another round of Ahead of the Curve webinar brought to you by Venture Taranaki in partnership with the Regional Business Partners Network. We now have a suite of practical webinars online to support you through COVID-19. If this is the first time you're joining us and tuning in, you can visit our Facebook page or our website to see any of the recordings. Our website is business.taranaki.info. Just search Ahead of the Curve and that will take you to the webinar page. Speaking of practical support for your business, today we have solicitor Sian Wingate from Light Legal and Tradie Terms joining us to discuss how tradies can get the best out of their terms to thrive during COVID-19 and beyond. Just before we jump into the webinar, I just want to point out how you can use the functions here. So if you go to the bottom panel there, you'll see a little chat box. If you could just write your name in there and the business that you're from and what you want to get out of the webinar, you can put that in there. Just make sure to remember to write that to all panelists and attendees. And also, if you want to ask a question during the webinar, please just look at the little Q&A box down there, click on that, and you can type your question in there. Over to you, Sian, to run through the presentation.
Thanks, Sian. And kia ora koutou. You haven't misheard. We do have two Sians on the call. It's the first time I've met a Sian who's a man. So it was great to meet Sian from Venture Taranaki. I am just going to hop in and share some slides with you all, and then I'll talk you through the top tips and the structure of my chat with you today. So just give me a moment. Okay, thank you. So I am Sian Wingate from Tradies Terms, and I'm going to talk to you today about some top tips that you can take away and start to use straight after the call to help you tailor your terms of trade to help you thrive beyond COVID-19. And I'm really delighted that you've taken some time out of your busy schedules today, because you're part of a network of businesses that are having to really just sort of take the reins and start running again post-COVID in this new kind of post-lockdown world. And one of the things that I'm noticing is that people are taking a really proactive interest in their business. And, you know, that's shown by you joining the webinar today. And that really excites me, because part of the training program that I've designed is to help people get a whole lot of knowledge and info about the terms and conditions that they probably didn't know before, and to help them understand how you can use them as a tool of your trade. So you might be a person who is on the admin side of your business. You might be a small or a medium business owner that not only does the admin, but you might be on the tools as well. And that can create a bit of a perfect storm, which means that you are so busy working in the business that it's hard to work on the business. And it's also quite hard to get access to information about some of the nuts and bolts of things like terms of trade. So that's why I've designed Tradies Terms, and that's why I'm really passionate about showing you some really simple tips that you can use without needing to go and speak to a lawyer in a traditional law firm. So I tend to start my sort of discussions with any tradies or small business owners with a question. Right now, the question is, what are you working on during level 2? And the sort of consistent message and theme that's been replied to that question is people are working on their systems. They've taken that time during level 4 and level 3 to take stock of what they might need to improve to help them thrive into level 2 and beyond. Or they are taking time to sort of finish a project that they might have started but never had time to work on. So that means that quite a lot of my clients have uncovered some problems that they now know that they need to fix. And some of the tips you'll get today will help with some of those common problems. The other thing that has come out during some of that Q&A is people have said that they're going to start working a lot more on cash flow protection. no doubt you, just like anybody else, really felt the pinch during level 4 and level 3. And that means that, you know, you want to now try and take some steps to keep cash flow coming in during level 2, level 1, whatever the new norm is going to be. You know, cash flow is always king, but it becomes even more essential when you have times when you can't bring in your income in the normal way. So that's something that a lot of my clients have said they're focusing on right now. And then probably the final thing has been getting knowledge. And, you know, just like we've said, cash flow is king. Well, we all know knowledge is power. And I think knowledge about what all the different parts of your contracting system are can really help you to build those systems and to get those cash flow protections in place. So these are sort of the common answers that I get, but those are just kind of plans, they're goals, right? They are, we want to improve our systems, we want to put in cash flow protection, or we really want to get some knowledge. But the next step is, well, how? How do you do that? And so that's the focus of today's webinar is I'm just going to give you a few really practical, simple things that you can do, and you can do them straight away. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to share some of the training tips and approaches that I use in my online contract training school. So on the screen there, you can see sort of who I am and what I do. And I'm not going to talk about that too much. I'm going to hop straight into the practical know-how. But this is kind of where my hints and tips tend to be housed. They're inside the Tradies Terms Academy. And what I do is I work through ways that the tradie business owners can isolate the issues. What is the problem that's causing them, for example, to not get paid quickly enough? Then they work on some goals about what they need to do, what they need to target. Is it systems? Is it getting some more cash flow protection? And then we jump into teaching them how the terms of trade can actually help them to achieve that. So today, you're going to get 3 top tips from me. And number 1 is I'm going to give you a really simple email trick that you can use to help you identify which kind of inquirer you are getting. And by inquirer, I mean somebody you've not started working with yet. So, you know, somebody's given you a call, they've dropped you an email, they've come through you through your communication channels, you know, an info request via your website. You might receive queries through Messenger. It might be word of mouth and somebody's dropped you a text or left you a voicemail. Whichever way those client inquiries come into you, I'm going to share with you a simple email technique to help you to pre-qualify that client. And I'll explain a bit more in a moment about what that means. The next thing I'm going to teach you today is how you can think of a deposit as a tool to qualify that client, as in a client that you want to work with or that is showing that they want to work with you or are ready to work with you right now. And then the final tip is I'm going to share a few of my hacks around how you can get a bit smarter with your payment terms. And those are your invoice terms that live on the back of your invoices, but they're also the payment terms that you might set up right at the beginning in your quote or on your website. And those are going to get you thinking about some ways that you can perfect some prompter ways of getting paid. And at this point, I'll just mention that it doesn't matter if you're a tradie business or not. These simple tricks are all applicable to any small to medium business. And I teach the same thing when I work with other types of clients. I work with professionals like psychologists, professional engineers, designers, creatives. I work with a broad range of clients that are small to medium businesses, and the same kind of principles apply. So let's start with the first tip. And this is my top tip about using an email to help sort and pre-qualify your client. So I'm going to start with a concept that we've all probably become really familiar with. And anyone that works, and works with themselves especially, knows that time is money. Every little bit of time that you spend chasing up an inquiry, replying to a quote request, doing the admin to arrange your invoicing, going out to do a scoping visit if you're a trade that needs to go to somebody's property, every time you look on the internet to work out a price, or you go and speak to your trade supplier to build up your quote or your price. Every single part of those activities are using your time. And so every single one of those activities is costing you money in some way. It's either money that you are not earning by being on the tools, or it's money that you're earning if you actually wrap that up in the admin kind of fee that you kind of put into your hourly rate. So whichever way you think of it, there's some sort of money element to that time that you're spending. And you might wonder why I'm kind of harping on about that. And the reason is that you might know from your own experience that building a quote is really time consuming. And it actually doesn't matter what kind of industry you're in. So, you know, a professional is going to spend time working out the scope of what they've been asked to do and build a quote around that. If you're a trade on the tools, you're going to work out what kind of job you're being asked to do. You might have to plan what materials you're going to use. You might have to scope out how many people you're going to need on the job, how long it's going to take, you name it. You know, you'll all be experiencing this. It takes a while to kind of assemble that quote. So one of the things that I have been working with a lot of tradies on lately is to help you to pre-qualify a client before you take that step to spend so much time working on a quote, especially if you're not quite sure at that stage that that inquirer is actually going to convert into a paying client. Are they ready to go? So I'm going to just firstly walk you through the 3 types of clients that I've become kind of familiar with over my sort of 20 plus years working in commercial law and with companies. And these might kind of sound quite familiar to you. So I've got 3 categories, and I love a shiny picture. So I'm all about showing you a photograph to make you think about what these types of clients are. The first one is the tire kicker. And that's an expression I've picked up more from tradies. I don't think I ever used it when I was in legal practice, but I totally get the concept. And your tire kicker is your client inquirer who just needs a ballpark right now. So they're not yet ready to maybe use any professional, whether it's you or another tradesperson. They're just kind of collecting in information at the moment. So a common example that my tradies tell me is when somebody is maybe planning a renovation and they're going to plan it for maybe the next 1 or 2 years. They've got to do some saving up first. They still need to go to the bank to find out if they can even get finance, or they're still kind of just working out kind of what they're planning to do. So what they're doing is they're just gathering in some information. You know, roughly how much is it going to cost me to get all my windows replaced? Roughly how much do you think it'd be per square meter if we put an extra garage there? Roughly how much is it to get a bathroom this size retiled? So they're definitely going to probably make that purchase or arrange that job at some point, but it's probably not going to be right now. So you might want a way to, you know, engage with them and keep them warm and, you know, be helpful, but not actually spend time building a quote. So that's one kind of type of client that you might use this email technique that I'm going to talk to you about to help, but without taking up too much of your time. So the next type of client that we've all probably come across a lot is the quote shopper. And the quote shopper is somebody that is definitely going to do the work. They're going to use somebody to do that job or provide them with that service. And this can go for anybody. It might be they're the client that is definitely going to get a website built with a graphic designer or a web developer, but they're quote shopping to find out what the different prices are. Or they're the person who's definitely going to renovate the bathroom. They've got the finance, they're ready to press the green light button, but they want to find out sort of who's going to get the best price or who can fit them in, you know, as soon as they want them to. And so the quote shopper is somebody that you might have in your funnel and you are absolutely committed to building a quote, but you might need to know if that is actually what type of client they are. You might need to know if they're actually ready to receive a quote from you or if they're actually just shopping around. So that's another important distinction, is you might be willing to spend some time on that client, but you kind of need to know if they're also asking other people to give them a quote as well, because you might want to sort of work out where you are, you know, in in the order? You know, are you being asked to provide a quote last? Are you the first company they've come to for a quote? And that is kind of really useful to know, because it helps you decide how much time you might want to spend building your quote, if at all. And then the third type of client is the one that we all want, the one that is ready to go. Their green light is on, they are totally ready to buy a service. They've maybe already come to you because you've been referred to them, or they've checked out your social media profile, or they've had a look at your price list, or, you know, if you're a retailer, they've been into your shop. Whichever kind of business you are, they've kind of landed on you as being the one they want to go with. And so they're the client who is going to really deserve a lot of time from you to build that quote, because it's probably going to convert into you getting the job. So those are the three types of client: the tire kicker, the quote shopper, and the ideal client, who's the green light client. And I am just going to share with you a little technique to work out whether they're the tire kicker, or whether they're the quote shopper, or whether they're the green light client. So before I share kind of my system, I usually say to my tradies at this point, especially if they're the types of tradies or small business owners that are sort of saying to me that their problem is they spend so much time quoting and it goes nowhere. So if they've already told me that's one of the problems, then this is the question I might ask them. And I might say, well, what system have you actually got for screening your lead? And I know they might not use those words. You know, that's kind of marketing speak: lead, funnel, you know, client category. But really it's the same thing. It's what do you do, or what system have you got to work out if it's worth spending time to build a quote for that particular inquirer? So I get kind of a variety of different responses. A lot of it is word of mouth, as in they have been told by another tradie, colleague, or peer that this client's a good one. They're really good to work with. They're definitely ready, and I've referred them to you. You know, it might be a head builder saying, actually, this client really needs a bathroom, and so I've put them onto you. Or they need the tiling to be done, I've put them onto you, and they're definitely going to use you because I've recommended them. So that's a system, right? That's a screening system. You're kind of reliant on the fact that you know that your other industry colleague wouldn't have referred them to you unless they were ready to go. Some people have replied and said they actually use a bit of a questionnaire, and that can be quite formal, you know, down to something on a website where you might have to fill in a form, or it might be more of a questionnaire that's asked during a call script. You know, they make that phone call, they have a chat, and actually what the person in the office is doing, or the tradie or the business owner is doing, is kind of taking that inquirer through a series of questions, and that's going to help them work out what kind of client they are. Are you just asking for a ballpark? Are you asking me to actually start building you a quote so you can compare it to something you've already got? Or have you been referred to me? Yes, you're ready to go, and I'll build you a quote. And I know that's not how you actually talk on the phone. I just mean that's kind of what's happening in the background. Then some tradies or professional services I work with say, do you know what, we just do a gut feel. It's the gut feel test. And that's a system as well. You know, they're like, we have a chat, we have a blather on the phone, and basically we work out from the gut feel whether they're the kind of person that's going to be one to take the job from. And a lot of my clients actually do say quite often they stop at that point. They've just got the feeling that it's not going to be worth their while working with that particular client for one reason or another, and they kind of walk away. And then quite a few of them say they've got nothing. They just take anything that comes through the door, and they go and spend the 2-3 hours every night to build up quotes and send them out into the vacuum, and then follow up after that. And they just do that every time by default, and they don't sort of stop and think about whether it's worth putting in that time. And then a lot of people just say it's just kind of in their head, and that kind of links to that gut feel. So you might sort of be looking at that screen now and thinking, oh, okay, one of those might be me. None of those are me. I've got something completely different that I do. Or you might be in the majority of certainly of my clients, which is there's kind of none, or it's in their head. And that's totally fine, of course, if it works for you. But for those clients that I work with that are coming to me because they want to get solid terms of trade, because they want to be able to get paid faster, put that cash flow protection in place for level 2 and beyond, or get their system sorted, they want to have a bit of a way or a tip or a tool to help them put a system in place. Whoops. So the way that I do that, and I'm just going to stay on this screen for a moment, is I recommend that you send out an email with an estimate or a ballpark. And that's a really simple technique. So you can do all these things first. You can have your phone conversation, you can receive your inquiry through your website, you can kind of do that pre-screening element. But another way that really helps, especially if you're quite time poor, is to send out a very simple email, which basically gives, it's like an info sheet basically. And the info in that email says things like, generally for that kind of work, you're going to be expected to pay around this much. So some people build it up on a per square meter. So like the tailor that I recently worked with, he just sent out the estimate email saying, I usually budget that it's about $80 per square meter, plus a service fee to call out. The next part of the email then gives the call to action. And it says, if you're still interested, this is how to get in touch. And that's where you provide your contact info, your email address, or you might have a link for them to, you know, submit a form online. However you roll, the tool that you're using is the email to give some information out, because if they're a tire kicker, that's all they want at that point. They just want that general information, and that's enough. And you've ticked that box and you've given them some useful information, you've added some value, and you know, you're going to be front of mind, hopefully, when they're ready to move to the next stage of actually getting somebody to do that work. If they're the quote shopper, it can also help, because they might just be gathering in a rough and ready kind of assortment of prices to be able to work out, you know, is this generally what it costs? And that will help them if you give them just an estimate or a ballpark, and they can kind of compare it with the other quotes. And they might call it a quote, but it might just be another kind of general estimate from another tradie. So they might say, oh, okay, I've had 3 kind of replies now, and generally they're all saying it costs about $80 per square meter to, you know, do that tiling, or it might generally cost $1,200 per square meter to build that garage. So that just helps them, and that helps them get to that next phase to decide whether they're actually going to purchase. And they might be making their purchasing decision on different criteria then. It might not be on the price. It might be, oh, that of the 3 I got the quotes from, that one's available sooner. That can slot in with the renovation plans I've got. Or that web developer, I like their style. I like the way their other websites look a lot better. So the email can just be something you can fire out and ask them quickly. You can template it. You can have it there loaded in the back end of whatever system you've got, Outlook, Gmail, MailChimp, you know, whatever you use. And that can just be quickly fired off. So that's my first top tip, is to use an email just to help you sort your client, then decide whether you're going to take the next step and spend time to build your quote. And that helps with your cash flow protection, because you're not using your valuable time to build a quote that is never, ever going to go anywhere. So my next top tip is deposits. And I don't mind saying that I'm a really big fan of deposits, and I'm a really huge advocate of using them. And you can call them what you like. It might be a deposit, it might be called a service fee, it might be called a booking fee, a reservation fee. Basically, they're all the same thing. A deposit, if you want my legal hat on, is part payment of the final amount. That's all it is. So if something was going to cost $100 and you take $20 as a deposit, you take the $20 off that final $100. So somebody just has $80 to pay at the end. So it's part payment. And that's kind of what it is. But its function and its kind of purpose can be a few different things. And that's what I want to share with you guys today. So one of the things that a lot of the clients I've worked with in the past, and this is from big corporates through to small businesses, one of the things they often say is a problem around getting paid is that their payment process looks a bit like this. It's kind of all over the place. they've got some clients booking in and then they maybe schedule the work somewhere over here, maybe a month later, a week later. Then they might have some clients that are sort of already halfway through a job and they've paid a little bit here, and there's some materials that need to be paid for a week later. And actually, for some people, they are not very organized. I'm not saying that to you. I don't know who's on the webinar today. You might be, awesome with these systems, but some people aren't. And for those that aren't, their kind of payment process can look a bit like this, where it's just jumbled and disordered, and there's no clear pathway that takes them from receiving inquiry, getting the job booked, to actually getting any cash in the door. So one of the things that I tend to recommend in this case is that people sort of start to think about what they could do to fix that problem. And that's something I teach in the training course. A lot of the training is not necessarily all about the nuts and bolts of the law. A lot of it is around doing some pre-work, about thinking more about your business systems to then slot your terms of trade in behind that. So one of the things I often ask is, okay, so you think you're a bit jumbled and you're not quite sure why you're not getting cash in the door or why you're not getting paid fast enough, and it looks a little bit like this. Why don't we start to maybe take a really easy, simple step to start getting cash in the door a bit quicker and get you paid faster by using deposits? And deposits can help you in a few ways. So one example is you can have a deposit to secure a booking that can lock in that job for that person. So let's use an example of the tiler. I keep coming back to the tiler. Somebody wants to use that tiler and they are going to be ready for them in about July. In their renovation timeline, it's going to be July when the jib's up, it's been waterproofed and it's ready in the bathroom to have the tiles put on it. That tiler might be asked to provide a quote. Yeah, you've got a green light, definitely worth spending the time. I'm going to put a quote through for you. And the person says, yeah, that's great. I want to lock you in for July. If you're in the scrambled, jumbled kind of image, you probably don't do anything in that period in between. You've got the job, you've written it down in your diary or in your scheduling tool and it's ready, but you've got no cash in the door yet. And you've got no guarantee of what might happen between the client saying, yes, they're ready to use you in July and actually July coming up. Lots of things can happen in between and they might actually cancel on you, or the renovation might go on hold, or the timeline slips. There's all these things that can happen. So one of the things I encourage is to take a deposit, and that does two things. Number one, it takes that client from being the inquirer or possibly the quote shopper to the ideal client. They're committing to you. They're paying you some money as a down payment for the job. And by doing that, they're committing to you that they're going to use you. It's also them giving you a really clear signal that they are willing to pay now. Because if they're willing to pay right at the beginning of your experience with them, they're far more likely to carry on paying you right to the end. If they're not willing to part with any money right now, it might be a little bit of a smoke signal that they're not necessarily going to be great at paying when you finally give them your invoice. So it does those sort of two functions. It helps to sort of qualify the client, but it also helps you to get some commitment from them and sort of give you a signal if they're a good payer. And then the second thing it does is it obviously provides you with some cash flow, because there's work you're going to do between that date that you say, yep, that's fine, I'll book you in for July. You're going to be doing some work, some genuine work for that client between that date and starting in July. You're going to be ordering some materials. You're going to be doing some scheduling and arrangements. You're going to be looking at your plans. Okay, can I fit them in on that date? Yeah, I'm going to need to make sure I send that person out that morning. That's all work. It's all valuable work. And it can't, you can't do your job without that work. So my point is, you're already working for the client before you arrive at site. And this applies whether you're a tradie or whether you're in the creative service space, for example. So say you're a web developer and you say, I'm going to start your website build in July because that's when you're going to have your logo ready, for example, or that's when you're going to have the money to start. But in between that time, you might have other people make some inquiries about you doing some work in July. If you know that you've taken a deposit from your client to start their website build in July, then you can confidently say to the other inquirers, I've actually got something booked in July, and that's committed. So the deposit is really helpful, but it also gives you some cash in hand to keep going until you get to that point when you start the work in July. So my theory is you can go from that to this, just by making some little tweaks. You can start to get your systems a little bit better organized. You can start to have a bit more of a flow between inquiry to quote building to taking a deposit. And that can start to take you from a bit of a scramble to a lot more linear contracting system. And you probably guessed by now that a contracting system is actually a sales system. They're actually one and the same thing, because you actually don't get paid unless you've made the sale. And actually, to make a sale, you make a contract. Even if you don't realize it, you're still making a contract. Somebody's going to pay you to do something in exchange, usually for cash. So my point I'm just going to kind of come back to again and again is the green light. So I know that most of us want to always achieve the green light client, the client that is ready to buy. So one of the things that I teach, as you've heard, is try and work out if your client is green or if they're the tire kicker. So you can use your email trick for that. Another way is to use a deposit, and that takes them from being tire kicker or quote shopper to the green light client. And then there's another way to make sure they're your green light client, which is your ideal client, the one that pays you. And that is actually taking the payment. That's kind of, obviously the thing that we're all here to do if we're working in exchange for money is we need to take payment in some way. So my other top tip I'm going to share today is some hacks about getting paid faster. And by that, I mean literally get paid faster, get the payment from their bank into your bank a lot faster. So we've talked about deposits, and when I ask about deposits, because that's to getting money in your bank faster, when I've asked tradies if they use them, most of the time the answers I get are never, we never do that. It's not what we do. Some of them say, oh, I didn't even know I could. And I can sort of help them with that and say, there's no law saying you can't. And they might say, oh, actually, it makes sense now that you've said it, it makes sense to take a booking fee. And some of them say, yeah, we're definitely going to start. And so most people that I work with tend to start taking deposits almost immediately before we've even jumped into the training part of the program where they learn about all the different clauses in contracts and what they mean. Most of them, the first thing they do straight off the bat is start charging a deposit. And they can do it in two ways. And that's sort of going to sort of round out this topic is if you don't know what your final price is, if you do charge up and you're like, well, I don't know if I can charge them 25% or 10% because I don't know the final amount it's going to be. It depends on the day, how long it's going to take. That's not a problem. You just pick a number. You pick an amount. To secure the booking, you need to pay us a booking fee of $150. Or if it's a massive job, you need to pay us a down payment of $5,000, say it's a kitchen. If it's a website build that's going to cost $5,000, you might say to secure the website build, you need to pay us $1,000 now. The point is you can just pick a number. It doesn't have to be a percentage. If though you are going to quote and give a fixed price and it's all in, everything's going to, total price is going to be your $5,000, say, to build the website or to pull up that fence, then you can say we need a 25% deposit to secure the work. So you can do it either way. So I'm laughing because it's a photo of myself and I was a bit embarrassed about whether to put that in. But my point is it takes a lot of my clients from feeling like this because they don't know what to do to get the cash in the door. Taking a deposit really takes them away from that feeling of what can we do to make sure that people are not messing us about, cancelling every 5 minutes, having to reschedule all the work, or we thought we had the job and then they've decided to pull out and they didn't let us know until the last minute. So the point about deposits is that can take you away from that by having that work locked in. So I'm just going to talk now about topic 3. And this is the one that is around Swift payment. And I've given you a bit of a hint that we were going to talk about it. So what I want us to all think about just now is, what are the roadblocks to getting paid on time or to getting paid fast enough? Now, during COVID-19, obviously the roadblock was COVID-19. You couldn't leave the house, you couldn't get out there to get on the tools, you couldn't deliver the services that you typically deliver. So some roadblocks to getting paid fast enough are external. They're not to do with you. They're to do with other things. So those things sometimes are not in your control. So I'm not going to focus on them just now. I'm going to focus on things that are in your control as a business owner. So one of the things that a lot of the tradies that I work with, or professional service providers, say is they've had a really good relationship with that client. You know, they've done a great job, they've really enjoyed doing the work, or it's just, you know, it's maybe not been amazing, but it's not been a problem. It's just been a normal, you know, run-of-the-mill kind of bit of work. But then suddenly there's some sort of roadblock, because when the final bill or the final progress payment or the final installment is due, somehow something happens and the payment just doesn't come through the door. And that is really common. And it's common for anyone. It's common, I'm sure, for any business owner, unless maybe you're on Trade Me and you get a buy now and you get the money straight away. But for most people, when they're doing the work first and asking for payment second, they have some sort of roadblock problem. And that's going to be my third and final tip I want to share with you today, is how to maybe get rid of some of those roadblocks. And you probably noticed by now, a lot of these points are not to do with the law. They're just practical business points. And I'll sort of give you a kind of a bit of a roundup about how they link in to the law right at the end, because that's not really what you've probably come on the webinar to learn today. So when we talked earlier about systems, one of the problems that I hear a lot of tradies say is that they are okay getting the work in the door, but then their system gets scrambled at the point that they need to invoice. And there's some sort of roadblock, and the roadblock can be themselves. It's not always that the client is not paying because there's a problem. There might not be a problem. They're not always refusing to pay because there's some sort of dispute. There might not be any. And sometimes they're not paying because they don't intend to. They've just forgotten. Or there's a few too many steps to jump through to pay. And so it just kind of goes into the, oh, I'll get to that, I'll get to that. I know I've got to go in and sort that payment. I'll get to it. And you just get kind of locked in that queue along with everybody else of trying to compete for the client's time to just get stuff done. And so one of the things that a lot of the clients I've got did during level 3 and 4 is they got themselves right up to speed and up to date with all those kind of outstanding slow payers, because they could get on the phone, they could talk to them, they could chase them up. But as you know, that takes time. So they kind of were gifted a bit of time during levels 3 and 4 because they weren't able to go out on the tools. So they could bring, you know, those overdue accounts up to date. But if they worked out how much time it took, they were like, we can't replicate that. We can't do that amount of work when we get back on the tools in level 2, because we're going to be on the tools. Like, we can't spend 3-4 hours every day chasing up all the outstanding payments, or 3 to 4 hours over a week even. So we talk about, well, what can you do to get rid of those roadblocks? How can you get from that? So one of the first things I want to talk about is roadblock number 1 is to not just follow everybody else in what they do. So don't be like a sheep that follows the way everyone has told you you need to invoice since you started in business. By this, I mean, in New Zealand, it is super common to give people 7 days to pay. And I've no idea why. And I'm a lawyer, but I've no idea why you give people 7 days to pay you. You're giving them credit, and you're not a bank, but you're giving them 7 days to pay you your bill. So my point here is, you've already put a massive roadblock in place just because you're following what everybody else does. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but I'm not saying that it's super helpful to get paid. That's kind of the point I'm trying to make, is if you want to get paid faster, you need to literally get paid faster. You need to give them the signal that you need to be paid faster. So one of the very, very first things you can do, and this is super easy, you don't even need a lawyer to help you with this, is change your payment terms and take off the payment in 7 days. It's payable straight away. You've done the work, they've got that value, they have got that warm fuzzy feeling, oh, I've got this beautiful new tile bathroom, oh, the payment's due, yeah, I've got to make it today. If you wait 7 days, then what you're doing is you're saying to them, number one, that you can afford not to be paid for that work for another week. You're also saying that you're giving them some credit so the money can stay in their bank account and not in yours. So you're sort of giving them permission to pay you later. Then you're also setting yourself up for losing that immediacy and losing that momentum that you've just built. So there's a bit of a psychology in getting paid faster. And one of them is around the sense of urgency. So if you have a think about, I always use the example of when I'm just buying a coffee. So this is my coffee from across the road. And I've gone in to buy a coffee because I either need a pep me up, or I just fancy one because I like the taste, or because, I've been up all night with one of the kids and I'm just exhausted and I need another coffee to help me keep going. So I've got a sense of urgency. So I go to the coffee shop and I ask to pay for a coffee because that is my urgent requirement right now. And somebody fixes that problem by making me a beautiful coffee. And I'm happy to pay right then. And I've got the warm fuzzy feeling because I've got the warm coffee in my hand and I'm super stoked because it's going to be delicious. And it's 5 minutes out of my busy day and I'm perfectly happy to pay there and then. If I've drunk the coffee, and then like this now, there's a little bit left in the bottom and it's a bit cold. And, I go back to it maybe even an hour later and I'm like, oh, well, I'll probably finish it because I paid for it. But my urgency's gone. I've had the caffeine hit that I paid for. I've had the warm feeling that it made me feel when I sort of had the first sip. And I've left the shop and I'm not thinking about the person, the barista that just made my coffee. My urgency is gone. So imagine if I only get the bill for the coffee next week. And then I'm told that I can pay for the coffee the week after. So then I'm 14 days later and I'm like, why am I paying that $4.50? What's that for? The urgency's gone, the warm fuzzies are gone. And I'm actually just like, I'm irritated now. I've got to pay this bill for a coffee that I had 2 weeks ago. And I just wish I could have just paid for it there and then.
Thanks for that, Sian. We've just about running out of time here. So we've got a whole bunch of questions. So
Awesome.
I'd just like to jump into some of those while we've got about 5 minutes left. Is that okay?
Yeah, no problem. It's probably a good place to stop.
Really,
stop my share.
In the meantime, can you just type in your email address in the chat box? So if there's any further questions, the audience can get through to those.
Sure thing.
But so the first question here, what advice would you give around pricing and costing? How do we know what to charge?
That's a great question. And I think the first thing you do is work backwards and you work out how long it takes you to build up a quote, like in real time, like how many steps you need to follow, and you can kind of map those out. The second thing is how much does it genuinely cost you in overheads to do what you do? Your building, your internet costs, all those admin costs. Then the next kind of part is to work out how much time it takes you to travel to and from various sites and average it out. And then the fourth bit is your markup on materials. And then the fifth sort of, pillar would be how much profit you need to make it worth your while. So you sort of build backwards and you end with your profit amount. And that should hopefully give you a little bit of a steer on your hourly rate. And it's always way higher and far less comfortable than you're usually happy to charge. But if you work that out and then you kind of build your quote around that, you don't need to tell your client everything that's inside your quote and how you've come to that number. But if you kind of know what those building blocks are to sort of come to your price, that will give you a really good steer to then pop that in as an estimate. It's roughly going to cost me £5,000 to do that kind of work.
Great. And the next question is here. Do you have any recommendations for IT systems we can use as tradies to make our systems and processes more efficient?
Yeah, so there are heaps out there. Some of the ones that my tradies use are Tradify. Some are Service M8. Another one is Invoice to Go. And a really great place to find some of these is if you're a Xero user, you can go into Xero and there's a section where you can type in trades and construction in the search panel, and it brings up all the apps that use Xero that integrate, and it will show things like Tradify and Service M8, and you can kind of do a bit of a shopping expedition through the internet to see what the features are. And I also post quite regularly in my Facebook group about different tradie softwares that my tradies use. So you can always hop in there and have a look.
Next point here, we don't have an admin person. I am the business owner and do all the quoting, which takes me a lot of time. I really struggle to put a price on my time doing quoting. Do you have any recommendations or advice for this person?
Yes, well, first of all, my very first piece of advice is value that time, because without you doing that engine room work, then the actual jobs can't be done. There are no tools, jobs to be done on the tools if you're not sort of working that engine room of the quoting and the admin. So, you know, a good starting point could be if there's a charge out rate for somebody on the tools, apply the exact same charge out rate for the person doing the admin, because the work is of equal value, really, because one can't happen without the other. There are a lot of pricing kind of exercises you can do with your accountant. If you've got a good accountant, they should be able to sit down with you and map out a way to build your overhead price. But a general rule of thumb, if you're just looking for a quick fix, a general rule of thumb is a lot of tradies put a 15% charge on for admin.
Great. And one final question here. Sometimes with renovations, we get a few surprises along the way. How do we manage this situation with the client, i.e. the original quote no longer stands?
Yeah, so that is your common variation, and it's your garden variety, and I'm sure you'll all experience it, and any profession does, scope creeps. So the sort of big trick there, number one, is when you actually do get to prepare a quote, is you're really clear about what will happen if the scope changes. And you're really clear that you're going to need to look at that quote again, and it's going to be a variation. And so you can kind of give forewarning to your clients and say, if things change, if you change your materials, if we come across things that we haven't expected, like hidden defects, or you pull up something and there's something beneath that means you need to bring in another trade to fix it, then your terms and conditions need to be really clear that at that point you're allowed to stop, have a chat with the client, let them know what you expect is going to need to happen, and that you're going to have to requote. And if you don't know how much it's going to cost right there and then, that's fine, as long as you've had some sort of conversation and you've got some terms of trade that back you up, that say we can add the extra costs on to the next installment or the final bill. And if it's a sub trade and you don't know how much it's going to cost, you just give them an idea. We're going to bring in a sub trade, their charge up is this, we're going to charge that plus a 15% margin to get that work done for you. Okay. But you've got to get your client to agree.
Great, thank you for that. Can you just put your email address on all panelists and audience?
Yeah, okay. Yep.
Yep, great, cool, thanks for that. So thank you very much, Sian, for joining us today. That was really practical tips for our tradies out there. And thanks for the audience also for coming along. So this wraps up this week's series of the webinars. We're going to be back here next Thursday, the 21st of May at 11:30. We're going to be talking about Venture Taranaki and the Go Local campaign. So we're going to explain exactly what it is, how to use it, and how to maximize the campaign to get the best out of the campaign and for your business. So until then, thank you very much, and haere rā.
Kia ora koutou, tana koutou.